and welcome to Tapakari. Today, in our social edition, we shall be talking about the importance of getting down to root issues. And to start us off, I'll start off with a lived experience. So, I've had the unfortunate experience of dealing with a leaking roof twice. So, the first time that it happened, the leak was in the kitchen, so they needed to sort that, and what that entailed was just literally tearing the roof apart, and it was a whole job that involved the kitchen, the sitting room. So I had to get to a friend's place, and then when that was done, come back, and then there's the cleanup. The second time it happened, I didn't have to leave, but still, there was the fact that they needed to take out the roof. So during the day, I had to go somewhere else because of the noise. Yeah, and what's interesting, the second time, this was in a different place, because they didn't get to the root issue at the first go, we had to break down the roof again. And so there was that noise. And then, but after that, things got better. And what am I trying to get at here? I'm trying to get at the fact that if you don't deal with the root cause of an issue, it just keeps coming up again and again, because in the second time they didn't get to the root cause of the issue, so we had to redo the roof. And also, typically you can't solve a leaking roof with a bucket, for example. One thing, anybody who's gone through a roof problem, you just have to tear that roof apart. There is no other way. The only way out is through. And what I'm getting at is that this even shows up in our personal lives, because some of the suffering that we encounter in our personal lives is based off the fact that we're choosing to apply superficial solutions to deeper issues. And the consequence of that is that the issue just keeps on recurring and recurring. Take, for example, relationships. So the first time you found yourself in a relationship that was toxic, you left. You left because of toxicity in one or another, be it financial, emotional, even physical. But then you get onto the next relationship and you find that the loop repeats itself, that there's still this toxic dynamic going on. And so you think, okay, so maybe the second relationship was a problem. Then you jump onto the third one. So you see, at that point, it becomes very clear that the common denominator in all this is yourself. And that's when, a lot of people realize that after going into therapy, you now have to start asking a different set of questions, because relationship one, I got into 2, I got into 3 without taking a break, and the dynamic repeated itself. So that now you have to go in and ask deeper questions. For example, instead of thinking that a superficial relationship, like a superficial solution, for example, here would be jumping to the next relationship, you need to sit down with yourself and ask yourself, what is it in me that finds this dynamic attractive? Which is why whether you jump from one to another, you had hoped it would be different, but the dynamic replays itself. So that now that would need, for example, therapy, it would need a personal improvement in one way or another, self-interrogation. So that's getting to the root of the issue. And in that way then, you're able to catch yourself the next time. You're able to dig deeper and understand, do I have a self-esteem problem, for example? Or was it my childhood, a chaotic childhood, so that now you're trying to react, you're trying to create that picture and hoping to get it right. For example, if there was an issue with your parents, you're hoping to create that narrative, create that dynamic and now be the one to fix it through this dysfunction. And some of these things you'll never know until you have an outside eye looking in once you go and work yourself in therapy. Or take, for example, a job. You might be working a job and you don't like the job. So you think to yourself, it must be the environment, which could be, but in this particular case, just work with me here. So you change jobs, you go to a place which is much better, is not toxic as you thought, but then you realize you still don't like the job. So then it turns out that maybe it's the root issue is not the environment. It was a factor, but the root issue is that actually it's the job itself that you don't like. So that, for example, if you're in banking, you realize I actually don't care for banking. And I remember that happened with me. And that will require a different solution because no amount of changing jobs will ameliorate that. It doesn't matter whether you go and find nice people, you go and find better people. The deeper issue is that the work is not in alignment with who you are or your interests or your values. So, granted, these realizations are important, but they're difficult because they require you to be very honest with ourselves, be very candid with ourselves. And that can be difficult because sometimes there are attachments, sometimes there are expectations, or sometimes it's very painful because, for example, some of these things of having to dig into a past, once you getting down to the issue, might involve, going through a tragic history of dealing with abuse that you encountered, dealing with rejection, dealing with, so many traumatic things. But if there is any comfort in going beyond the surface level to going to deeper things, even painful things I would not want to deal with, is that at least that once you get to the bottom of the issue, you don't have to keep on suffering. Because the thing about topical solutions is you keep on suffering, It's just like the roof. There is no solution to a leaking roof unless except breaking it down. There is no solution to a leaking roof except breaking it down, getting up there and figuring out what the issue is. So even in these things, they might be difficult for different reasons. There are attachments to it, there are consequences because, for example, changing jobs, there's pain to it in terms of going back into something we'd rather not. But the comfort is that at least once you get down to the deeper issue, there is a freedom that comes with it, a freedom of not feeling trapped, a freedom of not having to replay the same issue, go through the same pain. So really the admonition, or rather the encouragement with this particular thing, with this particular episode, is just to encourage an introspection. Once you realize a dynamic here that's not working right, but I'm the same variable, it's just to do the thing, to do the hard thing, to sit down with yourself and to get to the deeper issue. So that's all that I had for today, and until next time, kwaherini.